Welcome to my series of mini-reviews of the Summer of Steven. Let's get right down to my thoughts on the episodes of the second week. Restaurant Wars is an episode I did not really care for. I did miss the denizens of Beach City a little bit after all the plot-heavy episodes had us staying at the barn for an extended amount of time, but I didn't miss them enough to the point where I would be invested in these sorts of hijinks. It's simply not my cup of tea. The humor, while good, though poor Ronaldo, wasn't enough to make up for the lack of an emotional core, the lack of plot advancement, or the lack of character development. You could say characters were fleshed out a bit more, but the additions were so minimal that it doesn't really build up the characters beyond what they already were. In this episode, I was most invested in Ronaldo's mini-arc. Despite it playing off of a common trope for laughs, it still hooked me way more than the restaurant feud did. It was both sad yet simultaneously really amusing. But as far as the episode overall goes, it just didn't resonate with me that much, and it's probably among my least favorite episodes of the entire Summer of Steven event. Continuing with food-based episodes, we then got Kiki's Pizza Delivery Service, which I enjoyed a bit more than Restaurant Wars. Other than the primary character conflict being more interesting to me, I also enjoyed Steven utilizing his dreamscape powers, which he did on such a repeated basis he may as well have been unintentionally training those powers. It was a basic by the numbers episode that you could see the ending to early on, but it was fairly fun despite that. Kiki learned that if she doesn't value herself, other people may act in ways that lack respect toward her even if they still love her. It's a simple moral, but it is an important one. And before I move on to the next episode, I gotta mention how apparently making the episode's name a reference to Ghibli film wasn't enough. Near the end there was a reference to the end of Evangelion. I did not see that one coming. Monster Reunion wraps up the centipedal plotline of long ago, and yeah, this episode had plenty of feels. We get confirmation that the diamonds set off a corrupting light that caused the gems left behind on Earth, regardless of which faction they belong to become monsters. Steven Universe has yet another visually interesting flashback scene, this time illustrated via crayons. I really dig the varied ways the creators animate and depict homeworld-related backstories, and I hope this trend continues. I appreciated that, with a bit of persuasion, the other crystal gems let Steven try and continue to heal Centipedal, even though they're aware her old self won't be brought back. They let Steven learn this lesson on his own, even though it's arguably the more painful path. The scene where Centipedal loses control of her emotions and starts reverting was handled superbly. The music was great and the pained squeals and squawks of Centipedal were heartbreaking. Steven's desperate optimism and the horrible sense of urgency made for a very agonizing experience. In the end, Steven's optimism and desire to help isn't enough, but he still manages to find the best alternative available in the present to help his friend. Even with the ending taking on a more lighthearted tone to combat the bleak sadness of the situation, the final line of dialogue was still a powerful emotional gut punch. I really enjoyed this episode. Alright, so we all probably guessed the meta reason why Greg was given a buttload of money rather randomly, so it can be used to buy various expensive objects for hijinks.
Correction, we rented a boat.
Seriously though, let's get to the heart of Alone at Sea and why I loved it. Lapis missed being a fusion with Jasper! That is such a bold and complex move to make in a children's show, but at the same time it succinctly illustrates something important. An overtly hateful and damaging relationship that is seen as such can still cause feelings of desire and be longed for after it ends. Knowing a relationship is horrible doesn't make it easy to cast it aside, nor does it mean it won't be severely missed. It was a very non-judgmental way to present this concept and also makes Lapis far more interesting in my eyes. And Jasper literally getting on her knees to ask Lapis to be Malachite again was quite something. We already knew she realized how empowering and addicting fusion can be from the episode Super Watermelon Island, but an act of this magnitude demonstrates that she has become obsessed with fusion. Despite claiming how she's changed, Jasper's reasons for wanting to be Malachite again are all incredibly superficial and simply have to do with her lust for power.
We could fly!
While Lapis's primary reason for rejecting Jasper had to do with how horrible and unhealthy their relationship was, I'm sure Jasper's simple-minded reasons for wanting to fuse also helped Lapis make her mind up about Malachite. Honestly, I wasn't too fond of the events in this episode that did not involve Jasper, but the conflict between Jasper and Lapis was so engaging to watch that overall I'd call this episode great. Before I even get to discussing the flashback that this episode is all about, I gotta say how I love the little bits of Steven being more than human that have been thrown in during the Summer of Steven episodes. In this episode's case, a comment on Steven's speed.
Oh, you're getting fast there.
But yeah, this episode's purpose was to flesh out the past of Greg and Rose some more. I really enjoyed Greg's song. It was a quick yet highly detailed way to illustrate that Greg's carefree and penniless lifestyle was starting to wear him down as he can no longer afford food and is basically becoming a bum in the downtime that the Crystal Gems are away on missions. And it was awesome to see Vidalia, and geez, is she an extremely patient person, having to single-handedly take care of a kid while allowing Greg to bum around. Rose's monologues on capacity for change and how fascinating humans are was fun to listen to yet again, as was seeing Greg realize that he's been acting like an overgrown baby. That was a really fun scene. Just in general, this episode has a bunch of fun situations and was thoroughly entertaining. About Greg's perspective on growing up,
Growing up is something you gotta decide to do.
I don't particularly agree with Greg on this. I'd say that's probably not the norm. In fact, I made a rather long video about Adventure Time in which I discuss how growing up is something you often can't simply choose to do or force. But Greg's perspective aligns with his backstory quite well, and I can see why he holds it. And I appreciate that, even if I may not exactly agree with it. So those were my primary thoughts on the Week 2 episodes. I hope you join me next time because Week 3 was amazing.